joining us on the show, a very special guest and a friend of mine, I want to say for like 20 years now, at least 20 years. My buddy Jim Agnew is a member of the Writers Guild of America. He is also an independent film producer and director. He has done, I mean, God, I can either look him up on IMDb or I can just bring him on the show. So welcome to the show, Jim Agnew. Thanks for being here, Jim. Awesome to see you.
Of course.
Hey, man.
Hey, Chris, I think it's been at least 20 years because I seem to recall us being at Sundance watching the Carolina Panthers in the Super Bowl.
So that's been a long time. No, dude, you were a writer when we would go to Sundance and we would get like a condo that slept 8 people. And of course, 12 people stayed there. Sometimes we'd be lucky enough to get a place with a jacuzzi, but you got people sleeping on couches or, rollaways or, we made do. You know what? It was fun. All I remember is Eric Campos drinking beer at like 8 a.m, writing reviews.
And then drinking beer at 8 p.m. and then 2 a.m. Yeah.
Right. It just sort of was like a nonstop, like back in those days, man, that was super fun. But I'm just so proud of you, just being your friend that you just said, F it. You're at Sundance. You're like, I can do this shit. I can write movies. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the Writers Guild. Then let's talk about the strike.
I worked in the 90s for Streamline Pictures, which brought a lot of we brought all the anime over. So that was like my first real job. We brought Akira over, all that stuff. And then I kind of learned how to produce indie films. I produced a couple indie films and I was kind of like, I think I can maybe write scripts as well as this. So I just took a shot at it. I had a friend who was an out of work actor. We wrote a script, and the first script we ever wrote, John Carpenter, got attached to direct, and it never got made, but it led to the next thing and the next thing. And then before you know it, I got in the Writers Guild and was doing this for a living. But it's a hustle. It's a lot of work. People think it's easy. It's harder to stay employed as it is to get inside the Writers Guild, to get in.
Well, tell us, you glossed over a part. So then I got in the Writers Guild. I mean, not to, exactly get in the weeds, but like, how do you get in the Writers Guild? What is that process?
Well, one of the main ways, there's 2 different ways. If you're in TV, you have to have a certain point. There's a point system. I got in through the feature side. If you have a feature that gets bought from you and is made, and it's like a substantial real feature and they pay you, you qualify. That doesn't mean that's a WGA movie, but the next one you can join at that point. So the barrier entry is pretty much either you have to work your way up TV or you get a feature made. So that was kind of how I got in, because I was eligible for a couple of years before I actually joined, because when I was eligible was right when the last strike happened. So I was like, I'll just wait and see, and then got in there.
So basically it's like you write a film that gets made at a certain level or with a certain studio that requires you to be in the guild. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you do let's say you sell a script or, to anybody like a studio or TV network or streamer, they're part of the system. So you have to join the WGA anyway. So then
did you notice any change or any benefit once you joined in terms of what you did and how your career played out?
A few jobs.
Really? Okay.
I lost a few jobs because people don't want to pay mostly residuals. It wasn't pension and health back then. It's changed a little bit, but like with independent films, producers don't want to pay 1.8% of their gross to the writers. They'd be like, your Writers Guild? Oh, forget it. I'm gonna get somebody else to write this horror movie, and then sometimes they don't pay residuals, even if you are in the Writers Guild, and you end up fighting for that. But it's mostly, I've worked in independent film, but I've also sold a couple TV projects. It benefits you more in the big studio system, because there's checks and balances. The independent film world is more the wild, wild west. So
yeah,
anything can happen. Even if you're in the Writers Guild or SAG, anything can happen.
Well, it's like, I've had a friend who's done work with the studios. He said that the contracts are not even worth the paper they're printed on, because they don't even follow the letter of the contracts that they've agreed to, much less like any new contract they would negotiate. But that's just some friends of mine. I can't say, one person's disgruntled bad experience, although you do kind of hear them often, which leads me to say, like, there's not a lot of sympathy with the general public towards the Writers Guild or SAG, mainly because social media has exposed so many actors and people that work in entertainment as just assholes. I'm not gonna, I can't sugarcoat it any other way. Just like everyone from, like, I love Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker, one of my favorite fictional characters, inspired me as a kid. Mark Hamill just comes off as a prick. Like, and I feel sad saying that because I've met him. But my God, his persona on social media is, he really is kind of an asshole. And that's not even rare. It's more common, or especially when you see things like the writers who did She-Hulk, right? Like going after the fans that want to genuinely want to like the show. So not a lot of sympathy for people in the entertainment business for this strike. I don't feel it at all. Like everyone is struggling now. Like just, working people, economy's not great. Everyone's struggling, but like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, because I've never seen you say anything like that on social media ever.
No, I kind of stay off social media in regards to my views of things, because that's just a can of worms I don't want to deal with. But I mean, listen, I think right now we're in very strange times. I think SAG actually has some very legitimate issues, and there's a few things they're asking for that just seems normal. The Writers Guild is, asking for some things that, are very practical. The one thing I don't personally agree with is all the writer room staffing and quota. Quota is not the right word, but mandatory staffing, because to me, this business has always been, it's gig to gig. It's the wild, wild west. You either survive or you don't. And I think a big part of that is that in the last couple of years, 75% of the people now in the Writers Guild do TV, and only 25% are features. And I think that they're very into it's a system. Feature writers are more like, it's like going out and starting your own business. You have to write a spec. You have to find a producer. You have to find an actor who wants to do it. It's like, if you want to think of it, it's almost like you're going to start a little business to try to make the movie, where TV is a more institutionalized setup. You're waiting. I mean, most people in TV, there's people who sell shows and create shows and showrunners, but everybody below them is kind of waiting to be hired. So it's become more and more of like, I don't know, almost like an institutional system of like, where people want to be protected. I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong, but they want to have jobs. They want to be sure they have jobs. They want to have a future, but I don't know if this is the best industry to be in if you want to like have stability. That it's there's years I've made a ton of money, years I've made nothing, but I have to prepare for that all the time. And constantly the business is shifting, it's changing. It always does. So we're in very strange times, because part of the reason too I don't agree with all this writers room staffing requirements is, first of all, I don't do TV much. I'm a feature person, but also that AI is the big, elephant in the room. That's what we should be focused on, because I already know screenwriters who are higher level pros than me that are using it like crazy, and they won't talk about it, but they're using it to rewrite scenes. Like I know one screenwriter who will go in and say he knows how to talk to Chat GPT and tell, here's my scene, give me 4 versions of the scene. And then he'll rewrite it. But, people are already figuring it out. The genie's out of the bottle. I don't know. That's, I think, the issue we need to focus on right now, or there'll be no jobs for anyone.
Wow. Okay. So that's an interesting thing. Now, you told me some stories privately. I don't know if you can talk about everything, but I want to hear, there's 2 things. And also, by the way, you asked me to be on the show. You hit me up. You just got back. You asked me, like, can I be on the show? Because I know there's some things you want to get off your chest. But before we get into that, can you talk about pitching Marvel, a show?
Yeah, well, my writing partner, who I've worked with for a very long time, Sean Keller, we pitched Marvel a couple times over the years. We did pitch a show many years ago this is before they had TV, and I think they'd only made, this is probably like 2011. We did pitch them a Kingpin origin story that used all the B and C level characters, and it was like Kingpin was like a young kid making his way through the system, and then we had all the other gangs of New York and things like that, which was cool. It never went anywhere, but we were maybe a little ahead of our time. And then we pitched something else to Marvel once. It just shows you how big Marvel got, that the second time we went in a couple of years later, we had to sign an NDA just to get into the lobby, which I've never had happen before. And they talked to us about some TV show, but couldn't tell us what show. So Marvel's the most secretive thing ever. They're just like, here, we want to talk to you about a show, but we can't even tell you what. So do you have any ideas, characters and things? And, but they're really cool. I mean, listen, I'm one of Marvel's biggest fans. So except for maybe the last couple TV shows. So, that's always been my dream job, to get a gig with Marvel. Haven't got there. And maybe after this interview, I'll never get there. So
well, what?
Do you want to be there? That's the other question.
Yeah. So what are some of the things happening behind the scenes with the WGA? What are like, there's what's, because see, I don't trust the trades. I think the trades are press releases for the industry, and it's very positive, rah industry. And I don't think the trades are ever taken to task when it comes to so many stories that are written in the trades that turn out to not be true, be utter BS. And it's mostly regurgitated press releases. And I'll go you one step further. We'll get a press release about something that we want to write about, like something that we think our audience would like. And Alan is already using AI. He'll take a press release, have AI rewrite it, and we post it as a news story. Now, the news story
you just exposed me. It's like
other organizations are doing this. They're not talking about it. For example, we just showed the Film Threat website. There's a story about Sharknado coming back to theaters. Sharknado 1 and 2 is coming back as a special event. Well, it's not that exciting, of a news, but it's news our audience would like. We can't just post the press release, which, look, and a lot of people in news organizations have been doing this for a long time anyways. Rewrite the press release into news. But Alan's, it's something we're testing. It'll allow us to get more news, but the news are like basically announcements. We're not, if we're breaking something exclusive, it's a written story. But what are some of the things
let me just defend myself for a second. 70% of the time I can't use what they give me. So
right. Well, that's true.
I want to use it. Yeah. AI is not there yet.
No, it's not. I'm just saying that these are some of the things that will impact journalism. I'm saying there's what's being reported in the trades. Tell us what's not being reported in the trades. What do you know from the inside? Because you've been at those meetings.
Well, I think the one thing, and like, this is why I'm going to go back to the staffing requirements as the big thing that I think will never get solved and will make the strike go on and on. It's in TV. They want to have, I think it's a minimum now of 6 writers. And they want to have certain weeklies that these writers work on, because as we know, there's shows like White Lotus where, Mike White writes everything, he does everything. So they're trying to create staffing requirements, and listen, God bless them if they can get it done. I just think that that's always been like a line in the sand. Even before the strike happened, several people I know who worked at studios said this will never happen. And the reason they said it's never going to happen, it's almost like no-show jobs. And then once it's like no-show jobs, you can't dictate to the studio. You can dictate what people get paid. You can dictate how long they work, but you can't dictate how many people, because what's going to happen next? SAG's going to say you have to have 30 actors in every movie. Is the DGA going to say you have to have 7 assistant directors? It's like a slippery slope that can't be stopped. And that's why I'm kind of like upset about that, because I work in features. I can't go back to work because, this staffing requirements, which I think will never get across the line, and we need to focus on AI and residuals. Residuals suck. Streamers have found a way to not really pay. I have a Blumhouse project we did a couple years ago that Sony distributes internationally, and maybe 10 years ago I would have made, I don't know, like maybe 15, 20 grand in residuals. I think I've made $500, and that's Sony. Sony's not going out of their way to screw me. That's just how they pay out now. But I just think that this the Writers Guild's in, I think, for a very long haul. And I don't know if we're going to end up getting anything, really above and beyond. Maybe they'll give more on residuals. They'll raise the minimums. They'll pay more money. But this writer's room thing may just be at a stalemate for a long, long time. Where like I said, my personal issue is I think we should be focusing more on AI, because if, let's say we're on strike for 6 months, we've given 6 more months for people to think about AI. Before we went on strike, it wasn't at the front of everybody's talking points. So,
well, I'm just curious. The staffing thing is interesting because, like you pointed out, Mike White, he just wrote White Lotus. He wrote the show. You don't need a writer's room per se. And it sounds like also that the writer's rooms are being dictated by people that are there to fill a quota, not necessarily there to, you know what I mean? Like there's a way they want the writer's room to look like the United Colors of Benetton, right? This is what it seems like. So I'm curious because this comes up a lot on the show when we talk to our audience, and we'll get to questions from our audience, from our viewers shortly. So thank you to everyone in the chat for your patience, but come up with some questions here for Jim. But like, how is this quota thing or the, you know, like, look, I think diversity is a good thing, but you also don't have to have it all. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the story. And we don't need everyone to be like a box of crayons. It's a stupid expectation. I think what's really going to be nuts is these rules that the Academy is trying to push when it comes to movies that are eligible for Oscars. You're going to see some great films that will not be eligible for Oscars based on a lot of these rules. But how has that impacted things, or what are you hearing and what are people saying?
Well, I'm going to go back to a story just really quick. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I think maybe it was 2018 or 19, before the pandemic, we went and pitched a show at Netflix. And we pitched a show all around town to different studios and went to Amblin, AMC, like all these different places. And when we went to Netflix, I'd been there before, but I hadn't been there in a while. And I don't know if you guys ever been in the lobby at Netflix. It's insane. It looks like it costs like $20 million for just the lobby.
It looks like a club. It looks like a club. You go there, there's like TVs everywhere and displays, and there's like this, this bar where you can go and grab a drink.
The gate you have to walk through.
Everything. They give you like fobs to get through and stuff. So it was crazy. And while we were sitting there waiting, I said to the producer, because we had just been to like at ABC and places where that you just go pitch in a shitty bungalow that's like from 1935, right? Nobody cares what the offices look like. I even said to him, I said, I don't know if I trust a company that spends this much on a lobby. And he said to me, and this stuck with me, and this kind of ties into what you're saying. He said, look, you can't think of them as an entertainment company. They are a tech company. They are all about market share, and they are just going to go into massive debt to own that market share. They do not create entertainment. They are tech. And that, I think, is the entire problem that grew out of all this, is that they tried to get market share, spent like drunken sailors. Everybody else tried to keep up. And a lot of people got hired. And I'm not saying anything about their backgrounds or who they are or anything. Just, I think a lot of people needed to get hired who really weren't ready or qualified, to write. Look, I've made some movies that aren't so great. I've written some great scripts that can't get made, but I've been doing it for a living for 20 years. So, I have some say in this, but I just think a lot of people got in because it was like market share arms race. It didn't matter so much that you had done the work or you were qualified, because it was just, they needed tons and tons of shows. And we can see if you look through Netflix, there's so much stuff you've never heard of. And you're like, what is this? They paid for all those. A lot of people got in the Writers Guild. And I think they don't realize that it's constant hustle. A lot of these younger kids, I'm going to sound like my dad for a second. All these younger kids got in and they think one job makes a career. It doesn't. You have to continually hustle. And this business contracts and expands all the time. Even 10 years ago when DVD sales died, indie films went from 10 million to 6 million to now those same movies are being made for $2 million because the money's not there. And that's why you see so many Nick Cage movies that, and Bruce Willis movies that aren't that great. It's not that people set out to make bad movies. That's the only money they can make off them, is by making them cheap. So it's just the business is constantly evolving. And we're like, I think I told you before, I feel like we're in the French Revolution of the film business. And if people are not smart, half of them are going to end up doing other things.
Well, at a certain point, you saw that Billy Porter has to sell his home. This was announced in the news. Billy Porter's like, I can't afford look, the guy's worth $5 million. He's got, he probably just isn't managing his money very well. So I don't think that has to do with the strike necessarily, but you're seeing things affected. I have a friend who works at a lighting rental place. He just got laid off. So because the industry shut down, all the below the line jobs are affected because people are not working below the line. Electricians, gaffers, everyone are people who work in production, they're not working. So this is really affecting things. Secondly, it's also affecting restaurants. People they're not eating out, they're not taking meetings, so I think we're in for some dark times. But I also think that, like, I had a friend who, this is years ago when there was another purge in entertainment, he went back to culinary school and changed his career from TV producer to being a chef. I think you're going to see this happen a lot. But we're 100 days into this strike. What's the point? Have they won any concessions in that time? I think if anything, there've been I've seen a lot of selfies with celebrities. They're like, the week that SAG went on strike, Mark Ruffalo was out there and they were all out there taking selfies. But what has really been accomplished, and I'll say this, the sentiment is not there from the general public. The general public is, I think, tired of people who work in entertainment who have disdain for the audience. I know you don't feel that way. You really made your bones before you became a writer. You were a musician, you wrote for Film Threat, you lived some life before you became a writer. So that's all I'll say. But
on the flip side of that, I think it's a really great time for people who are doing their own thing. If you were ever going to go make an indie film, now's the time. There's just, my own personal view is I think this strike, the WGA, is going to last at least 6 months. And I think and we won't get many concessions. I think SAG will make a deal sooner than that, because they have 4 main issues. I think, AI, residuals, very practical stuff. The AI thing, I don't know how we tackle any of that. So that's kind of the like I said, the elephant in the room. But, if you were ever going to go make a small film, go do it. Now's the time, because there's going to be such a lack of films out there. Like I think you mentioned, I just produced a film back east. It has a good cast. It's Kyle Gallner, Sean Ashmore, William Forsythe. It was a small indie film that we made. And literally the day of the SAG strike, we got a waiver to finish the film because we only had like 5 days of shooting left and we're not tied to the studio. It's truly an independent film. That next day, they printed the waiver list and deadline. I got all these unsolicited emails from distributors and buyers asking what's going on with the movie. 2 days earlier, none of these people cared about the movie yet, and they're just like, what's going on? Do you need help with distribution? Do you need help with this? So, there's going to be a very gigantic lack of content it's not here yet, but 6 months from now, it will be there, because even if TV gets back up and running, it's going to take a while,
Well, look at something like the company that put out Angel Studios, the company that put out Sound of Freedom. Whatever you think of that movie, I think that movie, actually, if we weren't in such a politically polarized period of time right now, that movie would be nominated for Oscars. It's everything that Hollywood, at least from an Oscar standpoint, likes to think that they like. It's a social issue that's very important. It's great performances. It's also a very diverse cast, a lot of Mexican actors in it. That movie, I saw an interview with the guys from Angel Studios, and they were saying that when they went to CinemaCon, the theater owners, so you got Hollywood coming in, sort of pushing it. Here's a lot of our woke movies and whatnot we want to put in your theaters. But theater owners in general, they're pretty like middle of the road, middle America people who don't really care. They want to put butts in seats. So they're very just like regular, politically, centrist, not really political one side or the other, more like, hey, we're in business to sell popcorn and refreshments and movie tickets. So they were saying quietly to Angel Studios, we love what you're doing, we need more. And the problem they're having is really just supply. They need more movies in theaters. The Barbenheimer thing, I think, is brilliant. The fact that it became a meme and people went to go see both movies on the same day. I go to the AMC Burbank 16, which you and I have gone to see movies with. I've never had to park on the roof. Like, for the last several weeks, I've gone to see movies there a couple times a week. I'm always on the roof because that parking lot is full. I went to Yard House. They were out of Truly. They said they ran out. because they said it was so busy over the weekend, they ran out of certain beers. They were just out. Like it's all the business. And they said it's the AMC Burbank 16. It's everyone's going to see Barbie or they're seeing Oppenheimer or both. That's a good thing, but that's going to wear off in a couple of weeks. And then it's going to be a dry spell until like Dune and the Marvels. So, I don't know, like, and I really think that there needs to be people in tech like to use the word decentralized. There's another word for it. It's called independent film. Independent filmmakers are all over the US. John Waters in Baltimore, he's working on a new movie. You've got, Austin, Texas is a hub with Richard Linklater and Robert Rodriguez. I mean, independent filmmakers are all over the country. That's what that is. So now is the time. Not only, I just think there's less of an interest. Hollywood doesn't have the pull that it used to. And look at Disney. Disney is imploding. Audiences are wholesale just rejecting Disney products. I don't know. I'm sure there's a question in there somewhere. I guess just to comment on all of that, like in Angel Studios, they do these, what do they call, Alan, faith-based films? Not my cup of tea personally, but I saw a movie the other day or last week that was really good called Dreamin' Wild. It's a true story of a guy. Look it up, Jim. It's in theaters. Dreamin' Wild, indie film starring Casey Affleck, Zooey Deschanel, really good cast, Beau Bridges. And it's just a true story of a musician who made an album when he was a kid, when he was literally in high school. Then here it is years later, he's in his like late 40s, and suddenly like people are rediscovering this album and they reissued it. And then he went on a tour. It's great real life story. He happens to be religious, but that's not what the movie's about. Anyways, what are your thoughts on all of it? I'm sorry here.
There's a question in there. I know it.
There's a question in there. Some comments.
Listen, at the end of the day, I think that's one thing a lot of people, there's a lot of hysteria, and I get it. People are scared or worried. There's double strike going on. It's crazy times in general. But at the end of the day, I think one reason I've been able to survive the film business, make a living for so long, is I always go back to it's a business. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that. It's like the one color that matters more than anything is green. If you can make money, you can work. That's the most important. You can keep creating. You can keep doing things. So it's like, and I don't understand for, an industry where we're supposed to be so open to ideas that, like, I have seen people shitting on that what's it called? Sound of Thunder? Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. I've seen people say things bad about the film that I don't think have seen it, right. And it's like, listen, we're supposed to be like open to all these different ideas. So it's like, there's plenty of room for a Barbie movie and Oppenheimer and whatever weird horror movie and whatever weird, everything should be. That's what art is. It's supposed to be, available. It doesn't have to be all things to all people, right. And just because it's not your thing, that's what really makes me upset about, our current climate is sometimes people just crap on things because it's not their thing. That doesn't mean it's not somebody else's thing. Right. It's like what's definition of fascism? Forcible oppression of opposite views. So it's like, let them do their own thing. If they're not hurting anybody, there should be plenty of films and obviously people are going to see this movie because they keep talking about it being a huge success.
Right. Yeah, they should learn. Hollywood should learn from it. If anything, they should look at that and say, and the movie was originally at Fox. And then after Disney acquired it, they kind of dumped it. So very strange. We have a ton of questions for you. I hope you can stick around and answer a lot of questions. But one last thing. Do you think part of the problem is that the Writers Guild is just has too many members? Same thing with SAG. SAG has so many members. What percentage are actually working? And the only reason I bring this up is by comparison, the Directors Guild, it's hard to get in the Directors Guild. Once you're in, you're a working director, you're DGA, right? Same thing with the ASC, American Society of Cinematographers. It's not easy to get in. That's like the ASC, I think is like 400 or 500 people, and that's it. So these small organizations, the WGA is large, SAG is the biggest, but the percentage of actual working, the industry just doesn't support it. Is that an issue?
No, I think, listen, I had heard a while ago that half the people in WGA work, and the other half just got in on one job and they've just been in forever, or they're retired. So I've heard 6,000 people really work. And same thing with SAG. But the thing is, there's a bigger problem. It's not that there's too many members. It's just that people have to keep in mind that the film industry is very reflective of society. It's the same way in SAG and WGA. DJ is a little bit different because they have a working class of assistant directors. But it's reflective of society. It's like 2% of the people make all the money, and then there's a big chunk of people that make a living, and then there's people that have nothing. So it's like that's the way it is. It's like 2% make way more than everybody else. They talk about, I do get frustrated when I hear about all these people, they're like, hey, the studios, Iger makes this and that. But if you add up all those overall deals that Shonda Rhimes and Ryan Murphy got, there's like 5 or 6 people that got $1.2 billion, and as that trickled down to all their writers, they're the ones that were in charge of hiring their writers and what they can pay them. So, I mean, great. Now I'm never going to work for Shonda Rhimes or what's his face. But, I don't think they're going to hire me anyway. But the thing is, it's like everybody needs to take a look at themselves. And it's sometimes some of this talk from the studios and the Writers Guild and back and forth feels like a hostage negotiation, not a actual negotiation. It's like, do this or else. We must do this or you die, or, it's going to all end. It's like, it's still TV and film. People need to make a living, but here's the thing: if they make certain changes, it's just there's only so much money. It's just gonna cut out. They're trying to do something. I'll say one last thing: the Writers Guild, where it's screwed my writing partner on a couple of things. They want to make studios pay pension and health for both people instead of, we've had to always split it, so we have to make twice as much to get our pension and health every year. We've done it, but it's a struggle. But if they force the studios to do that, which I agree with it, but what's going to happen is they're just going to be like, oh, no more writing teams. They're going to have a choice between a single person or 2 people to write something. They're going to hire the single person. So it's the studios are crafty, and they're just going to take whatever money they have and just, don't get me wrong. I support the Writers Guild 100%. I just don't support that one issue I talked about. But,
let's
so
go
we'll see what shakes out.